over several decades of listening to children and teens and parents who've experienced a death of any kind from any means. And I'm not a person who uses the word never very often, but I can say in over 30 years of listening, and in the United States, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, all over the world, I literally have never heard a child say, "I'm glad I was lied to."
My name is Roxanne, and the person who died in my life was my dad, and he died by suicide.
Hi, my name is Lucy Martin. This is my daughter Alina, and this is my son Eric, and my husband, their dad, died by suicide.
I'm Zoe. My mother is Sam, and my brother died from suicide.
My name is Anne Marie McMillan. My husband died. His name was Jonathan William Merwin. He was out in Pennsylvania. Somebody, carjacked him. They wanted his stuff. And they shot him 5 times.
Well, his name was Robert Michael Newell. We called him Bobby. What did Daddy do for a living?
He was a cop.
He was NYPD, retired.
I'm Marcy. I'm Sabrina, and my dad's name was John.
Prior to telling Brighton and Bradley that Justin committed suicide, a lot of thoughts ran through my mind. I didn't know if it would be better to tell them, to not tell them. I didn't feel like their hearts should have to handle that on top of everything else they had to handle.
He was playing his favorite music in the car, and he just locked himself inside, and he kept the car running. And that's how he died.
So obviously it was a shock, but after I was told that he had taken his own life, my first reaction after the shock of it was, how am I going to tell Sabrina?
I was like, how do you tell? A little boy. That his dad was never going to go. I had no idea.
Rather the next morning, I made a decision in a few minutes, really quick, and I just couldn't imagine. Part of me wanted her to have one more night where she can sleep at peace, thinking Dad would come home. Another part is I knew that she had to know.
The fear behind telling them that their dad committed suicide, like their dad didn't die of cancer. Their dad, it's the feeling of that he chose to leave them. And I didn't want them to think that they did anything wrong. It's hard to explain to a kid, mental illness and things like that, and addiction, and I didn't want them to think that it was him. I didn't want them to think that it had anything to do with them. He was sick, and that's why it happened, and that's just not that easy to explain to a 7-year-old and a 12-year-old.
Zoe was downstairs with Luisa's other sisters, and the story was that he had an asthma attack, so that's what she heard, and that's kind of what we went with for a few months until, like I said, from May till September. I told her in September the truth, and so it was a little bit of lying, I guess, in the beginning. But just because that's what she had already heard, and to confuse that or to change that was going to be a little hard.
Holding it in for 7 years was really hard, and the way it affected me, I basically ended up with PTSD, generalized anxiety disorder, and depression. because I couldn't tell them.
There's a difference between telling the truth and giving every gory detail of something. Sometimes kids can't hear everything all at once, and they will ask questions as they're ready to understand the next piece.
I sat them down, and again, and it was on a couch. I sat them down on the couch in the living room, and I said, listen, I said I wasn't truthful. I lied to you about what happened to Daddy. And you could see the look on their faces, and I said, Daddy, he took his own life.
Well, my dad actually committed suicide. I found out how he died on my trampoline, and my mom told me. My mom explained it in words that I can understand because I was only 7 when this happened.
For children to know the truth about what happened in age-appropriate, bite-sized, small pieces is pretty critical to their long-term coping with what has happened in their life.
I'm kind of happy that my mom told me the truth because it makes my life easier to know, but when I first found out, it was hard.
I'm not advocating that, for example, after a suicide death, you sit down with your 5-year-old or 8-year-old and you tell them every single detail of what happened. But I am advocating that you sit down and say, a very sad thing has happened. Daddy has died. He died of something called suicide, which means that he took his own life. And then you let them ask questions.
I've learned from them how much better they do when they're told the truth. Because no one, no matter what age you are, likes to be lied to. When's the last time that felt good? That doesn't feel good. And the other kind of big piece of that is when you're lied to, you're not given the opportunity to process it with everybody else in your family. When you're lied to and you find out the truth in some other way, which kids often do, you have to process it on your own.
I felt when she told us last year, I was already grieving, and I was already at the point of realizing my father was gone and realizing that I didn't have him growing up. But then when she told me, I just felt like I kind of went up the mountain again, oh, I have to go through this whole thing again.
And then you wonder, why is there a secret? What's that about?
And then one night, I was just sleeping and I was thinking, did he really die? Did he really commit suicide? Did he even want us anymore?
Whereas when kids are told the truth, again, in age-appropriate, very gentle ways, but when they're told the truth, that gives them a chance to go, okay, I'm a part of this family, what does this mean? Ask questions, but they can actually cope with it in a way where they feel included in their family. Being lied to, you're automatically excluded. You're not in the inner circle. And that just increases isolation. The other thing that increases is the stigma and shame around suicide. Because if kids are lied to about suicide and homicide, then they feel like, well, what's wrong? Why couldn't I know the truth?
I think it's important to use language that helps children and youth really understand what happened. And we use a lot of euphemisms like expired. Well, can't we just renew him? Or passed on, and sometimes when we use that language, children particularly don't understand that means they're dead and not coming back.
When I was told when my dad had passed, I was told when I was younger that he was gone, but I don't think I fully understood it at that time. think I just like said, oh, he's gonna come back, but I think it took me a long time to realize that he wasn't gonna come back. Just last year she had told me the truth. She told me that he had died by suicide. It's like, it was a lot to take in, and she had told me first, and like she didn't want to tell Eric.
Well, I knew that I was going to tell her, that I was not going to try to hide the truth. Simply also because I thought if I don't, she might start imagining things and building her own story, and possibly, I mean, it was already awful. There's just no way around. But I didn't want her to start wondering what happened exactly, and possibly let her imagination make worse, more monstrous.
Once questions start popping up, it was going to be confusing to try to keep up with my lives if I did it that way. So that's why I told her the truth.
An FBI agent took my daughter upstairs, and then another one brought me into my living room. She was the one who said to me, "You cannot tell your children the truth." She was adamant about it. And in hindsight, you know, I'm listening to everything she tells me. I didn't know, I was so confused and I didn't know what to do. And she told me I should not tell my children because it's not something they would understand, and it's not good for them to know. They don't need to know the truth.
But yeah, people told me that I didn't have to tell them right away. Like I said, I contacted the counselor at schools. I had friends come over. I thought as many, she recommended having, a support system there when I told them, whatever I decided to tell them. She didn't really tell me what I should or shouldn't say. She just recommended a support system. So I got as many people to the house as I could for when I told them. It would have been so helpful to have something, a pamphlet, something to tell me what the best thing to do for them would be. When I told the boys initially, I told them as soon as I got off the bus. We were, walking up the driveway. We kind of sat down by the flower bed, and I told them that their dad's heart stopped. After when I came to Common Ground in late November, it was told to me that I should tell the kids the truth. So I decided that I was going to wait till after Christmas, because I was going to give them like one more normal holiday. I was worried about them hearing it from other kids at school. There were parents that knew the truth. I trusted these parents to do the right thing and, not throw it. I was even afraid for them to hear it at his memorial service. I asked them to put up a sign like, please remember that there's children present, because I didn't want people talking about the specifics of anything and my kids hearing it.
So a few things that happen when families decide to withhold the truth. Typically, kids find out. And even before the internet, even before everybody was walking around with a smartphone and could Google something at a second's, notice, even prior to that, when kids knew or felt that they were being lied to, think back to when you were a child. How did you find out information? You would hang out around the corner and just listen in. It wasn't difficult at all. And when you have grieving adults who are maybe talking to other adults or on the phone, they're not paying attention to kids that are right around the corner.
I think she overheard. I was screaming, and I forgot that she was behind me, because I was shocked. It was the most unbelievable thing that ever happened in my life, and to hear it's surreal.
That's one main way kids find out. Kids find out from social media. Kids find out from the computer.
Eventually, they went back to school. Still not knowing the truth, but it was bothering me. I said it was in the papers, a lot of articles on the internet, and a lot of people making comments.
Another way that often we don't think about, kids find out from their cousins, because their cousins typically are getting the information firsthand from their parents, because their parents aren't necessarily censoring themselves. The other way is neighbor kids at school.
The week that my children were at school, one little girl was skipping through school in Connor, and that was in 5th grade. Connor was in 5th grade at the time, and she was skipping through school yelling, "Connor's daddy shot himself in the head." 2 weeks after the incident, my daughter comes in the room, and we're all having dinner, and a bunch of my friends were over, my mother was there, and we're all sitting there, and out of nowhere, she comes up to me, she goes, "Mommy, do you know what Sean said in school today?" And I said, "No, what, honey?" She goes, "So ridiculous. He said daddy shot himself in the head. How stupid is that? He's so stupid." We all just froze. This is what the little boy said to her in her class.
So there's many, many ways that kids find out the truth. So you might wonder how I know that. Well, 20 years of kids telling me how they know the truth and how they found out.
I've had families who, for example, have said, "Your dad died in a car accident." And I've had the child come into their group and say, "My dad killed himself in his car, but don't tell my mom, she thinks it was an accident. Could I have done something to prevent it? If onlys, what ifs?" And while those questions are there after other kinds of deaths as well, there's an additional stigma that is often associated with suicide death.
Yeah, there's a huge stigma attached to suicide. A lot of people think that people, choose to leave. They chose to do this. He chose to take his life. No one chooses to have cancer, and no one chooses to be an addict, and no one chooses to have a mental illness. So, did he choose to commit suicide? No, he was sick, just like everybody else is sick.
I feel like there is a difference with coping with losing someone through suicide, because it kind of I think about how I didn't see the signs, and it's just maybe if I did see them, it could have been different. Yes, if I saw the signs, I think I could have helped.
I definitely think that talking about it and having it out there, even just saying that your parent, that your person died of suicide as opposed to committed suicide is.
Language becomes challenging for people a lot of times when someone has died of suicide. Sometimes our kids will say, "My father died after a long battle with depression. He took his life." A lot of our kids, once they understand that it's okay to talk about him, people won't shut down or act funny with them, will say, "My dad jumped off a bridge. My sister took an overdose of heroin. My mother hung herself." And when we use the words like suicide means taking your own life, it helps them process and really begin to understand what that means for them.
Death is a harsh word. The words are harsh. The reality is much worse. So the more we can help give them language. The other thing about language is it's empowering. Having the words and being strong enough to say them. And when I say strong enough, being bold enough. For a child, you're empowering them when you're giving them words.
I feel like my relationship with my mom would be different if she hadn't told the truth to me, if she just lied about it, or if she just said that she wouldn't tell me. I feel like it would be a lot different, because I would always be questioning her, and I would be kind of forcing this question on her and forcing this memory on her constantly, and it would just kind of ruin our relationship together.
Because, I don't know, it's just good to know the true way, because nobody would make that up. And it's just really good to know the truth, and that you wouldn't find out in a bad way. You found out by somebody telling the truth. And that's just
be open to like finding answers to whatever questions might come up, or like also be aware that in the moment it may be uncomfortable, but on the long run, just being able to be honest is like really helps establish trust.
Young children are very curious, and again, you don't have to give every gory detail. I would answer their questions honestly, but for young children, their curiosity, a suicide death doesn't have the loaded, stigmatized weight to a 4-year-old that it does to an adult. And it isn't that different, really. The issue is that the person is dead, not coming back and gone, and how it affects the child.
Again, if they're not told the truth, and then they hear a word like suicide, any child old enough to use a computer, which they're using so young now, can go and Google what is suicide, what is homicide, what is murder. So they're going to find out answers. Do you want them to find out with or without you?